Hello, how you doing? Welcome back. Video 2.3, the end of chapter 2. And yeah, we're still continuing to talk about how to kind of get the most out of a classic peerScholar activity, or at least giving you some ideas that you can share with faculty that they might find interesting and may help them squeeze a little bit more out of their peerScholar activity. All right, so let's just continue here with the third video. And this one really is about the power of video. I mentioned in my previous one, maybe I shouldn't have said video. Maybe I should have said going beyond the printed word. And you know that to an extent, everything I'm about to say could be applied to any non-written submission. You know, you can compose in so many ways in a digital platform, and that's what we're really going to talk a little bit about today. I will focus mostly on video because I think that kind of has the most potential, but I think the lessons that I give you here could be applied just as well to lots of other creative kind of uses of digital technology. So let's just jump into it. So a big part of the story here is going to be about engagement, student engagement, and generally its power to produce, to support, I should say, you know, a really deep learning experience. When students find a learning context engaging, they think deeper, and the resulting learning is much more durable and impactful. It's much more personal. So as I say here, in the best cases, students actually own the learning, doing more than they have to because they want to. If you can really get this right, if you can get the engagement right, then the learning is what we always wish it would be. You know, enjoyable, like it is when we're learning something we really want to know more about. And so we're trying to trigger that sort of learning, the personal learning, where the person not only, you know, gains some knowledge, but they gain the knowledge in a way that matters to them, and therefore connects up to other things in their mind, in their brain, and making that learning much stronger. So one of the claims I'm going to make is that, you know, we can enhance engagement by going beyond the printed word. And in fact, you know, if we think about it, so many of us are used to being brought up by writing essays and doing all these sorts of written assignments. And we kind of know just what it says here. Everybody in college hates papers. Students hate writing them. Faculty hate grading them, you know, etc. I'm not going to read all this in detail. I've got the link on the bottom of the slide there for you. But the basic punchline is we've had this really, it's just been handed down through the years, this notion that written expression is powerful in some way. And it is. I don't want to imply that it isn't. And I certainly don't want to imply that we should get rid of essays altogether. There's something about structuring your thoughts in a written way and expressing them in that way that I think is very good for organizing thought, and many other things. And so my claim is not let's get rid of written communication. But I do want to say, let's think of it as one form of communication, and let's consider the other forms of communication. And you know, maybe we want to imagine a situation where students get various ways of expressing themselves and expressing their thoughts and ideas. Okay, so let's move away from written communication for a moment and talk about video-based activities. So first of all, here's some of the advantages, the benefits of thinking video. For students, they feel current and relevant. You know, think of social media. What do you see in all of these, you know, Facebooks and Pinterests and whatnot? Video or photos, you know, and photos again, everything applies just as well here. Or images or infographics. You know, all of these sorts of things students are exposed to quite often, and they are, in fact, a very common form of communication these days, especially information communication between YouTube and TEDx and all of these things. It's a very common thing that students can understand. You know, it fits in their world, and they can understand why they should learn it because they see so many people using video as their, you know, tool of communication. And so it seems relevant to them, and they enjoy the learning a little bit more that way. So they're kind of connected more to the learning itself. Engagement is higher, okay? Also, it's a real natural way to get students being creative. I mean, Peer Scholar's all about developing skills, right? And I often talk about things like critical thinking, creative thinking, communication. Well, as soon as you unleash a student to produce a video, and of course, keep in mind that they all have the equipment to do this, usually in their back pockets at any time now. Their phone is a powerful device. Their laptops are extremely powerful devices for creating videos. So you no longer need, some fancy technical studio or something in order to do this. And so once you kind of unleash students to create a video or an image or something like that, you're really encouraging them to be creative and to be reflective, because that's part of creativity, right? Anytime you start to create something, you can't help but say, is that a good thing I just created? It's critical thinking, reflection, etc. And not only does it do this for students, it also does it for faculty, okay? You can give the same written assignment 50 million times and grade it, and blah, 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 and roll your eyes and nobody reads your feedback. That's fine. But you can also sit and think, what could I ask my students to do to link my material in my course to some video they have to produce? So let me just give you an example. Maybe in intro psych, I say, I want you to create a video that demonstrates something you've learned in the class. Like either create a little movie of you in an interactive situation or whatever you want, an animation, it's up to you. But I want you to take some concept in the class and demonstrate it through video in a powerful way. Okay, and so that really kind of, what do you mean? That's all I'm saying. Figure it out. Do what you want to do. But maybe, here's a rubric for what a creative video looks like. So take that, but go ahead and do it. All right, so we're really unleashing, and this is really nice for students to have a situation where there is no right answer, where it's all about how compelling they can do something, and that's what really gets the creativity and the engagement going, okay, which is really cool. Now, there's another really cool advantage. And that's that when, I've always been talking about skills learning, but I've been talking critical thinking, creative thinking. That's cool. peerScholar does all those. But we can now really take skills learning in a very literal sense and think of hands-on skills. Imagine nursing education, where nurses have to learn how to do certain things. Or music education, where you have to learn to play a musical instrument. Or any kind of education, imagine in the trades, where you have to learn how to do some very specific process. You could be plumbing school, where you have to show the teacher how to, I don't know anything, weld two pipes together. I don't know what you do in plumbing school. But again, you can use video to show yourself doing that skill and bring that into peerScholar. Okay, so I want to just show you this now. I want to make this concrete. So here's back to our demo of peerScholar. This is the student side, so I'm just going to stick to the student side. And here's two examples I want to show you to kind of hit this point home. This is an example that's based on what a professor at University of Western Ontario is doing. He teaches guitar. He teaches fingerstyle guitar. So this isn't exactly right in the sense that this is an electric guitar here. We've just taken these videos off YouTube because we don't obviously want to be using real student videos here in the demos. But the idea is every week his students are challenged to learn some new composition. And so they practice, and just before the due date, they set up a video camera just like this, and they play the composition for the video camera. Let me see if I can find one that's classical guitar, at least look a little, here we go. So they might do this. Okay, that's actually a pretty good example because he's doing it slow like a student might do it. He's not some crazy virtuoso that's just shredding through here. But again, you could now watch this as a student, watch this video, and then score it, assess it. And there might be, here's following. Which of the following things did this student do well? Play the right notes, mostly. Had good timing, had a good feel, etc. So you can have students now commenting on a physical skill and how well that skill was presented in this video. So again, they're still doing the critical thinking. They're still having to think critically about this. They're still having to think creatively, especially when they give constructive advice. to the person, which they're asked to do. They have to communicate. All those things I already told you are going on, but they're going on now in the context of a physical skill. And that's really making all of the learning about that skill, that you're training quite literally in this case, right? So that's very cool. And you can imagine all sorts of skills that you could use in this context. Let me show you one other example of a more general skill, but I want to use this to emphasize what peerScholar can bring, even say to very large classes. This example is based on something that I did in my class, where I have a very large class, 1,700 students. Yes, I said that right. One of the things we sometimes do is have them work on their oral presentation skills. We literally say, rather than writing some argument piece like we normally do, we want you to take your cell phone and set it up and put it on record, and I want you to present your argument verbally, orally, in an effective, powerful way to the camera. All right. And so now students are going through and seeing their fellow peers present, not live in front of a class. You can't do that in a 1,700 student class, but you can do it this way. And you can really push the learning. What we're using here, by the way, let me just show you. There's a rubric for oral presentation skills. Of course, you know me and rubrics by now. Here's a rubric for oral presentation skills. It breaks them down into nonverbal, verbal, and content. And you notice for each it leaves room for comments on those things. What have we done in peerScholar? Well, we've got the nonverbal with the comment, the verbal with the comment, and the content with the comment. And so we have students applying that rubric to the work of their peers, constantly learning what good presentations, what the characteristics of good presentations are, and learning all these things. Now, what's not in this list? What's not in this list is dealing with the social pressure of having a bunch of eyeballs staring at you, right? Now, you don't have that in this case in the video. So what I've done is in my very large introductory psychology class, I have students working on these parts of giving a presentation, learning how to do the eye contact, the body language, and the poise well, learning how to have enthusiasm and elocution, and learning how to organize things, the mechanics of presenting, the subject matter. And so if they get all of those things and they get to work on those a little bit this way, then when they do have to present in front of others, they've already got some of these basics down. Yes, they have the social anxiety to worry about, but maybe that's all they have to worry about. And in fact, if these things are in pretty good shape, maybe they don't have to worry about it as much because they're actually giving pretty good presentations. And it's, of course, the fear of failure that feeds a lot of that social anxiety. So if you feel like, I got this, maybe that anxiety won't be there. Okay, so just a really cool example how, when we say skills now, you're seeing we're talking about skills from, a very manual kind of skill to something like oral presentations, and all the while involving critical thinking, creative thinking, all this kind of stuff. You can tell why I'm jazzed about this peerScholar thing, huh? I think it's really cool. Okay, so those are just two examples to give you a sense of the power of video. I came across, by the way, when I was looking at this resource, in case you can't see it up there, it says educationaltechnology.ca/2127. This is 10 ideas for classroom video projects. Conversation with a future me. Can you imagine doing this to your students? Saying, I want to imagine yourself at some point in time, a younger version of yourself perhaps, or an older version of yourself. But talk to that person. What would you tell that person from your current perspective? Wow, what kind of crazy idea is this, right? What happens if you tell your students to do this? They're going to be like, what? What do you mean? What? Fantastic. Get them all stirred up, get them thinking, try to figure out what that means. But this paper has a number of genre-shifting movie trailers. It's good for exercising creativity. It doesn't necessarily relate to a course topic that much. But there's all sorts of cool things you can do. Some of these are so things like this course trailer. You can get them to kind of make a trailer for the course for other students. Tell them what the course is about. Summary of your learning. I want you to summarize your learning somehow in a video. I mentioned that possibility with intro site, etc. So a bunch of cool ideas here. Check it out. All right. So just before we leave this topic, I do feel the need to highlight some things that you or faculty members should consider when you're doing a video-based activity. In fact, I would suggest that if you have a faculty member who's interested in doing this, maybe point them to this video. Maybe ask them to take a few moments and look through it, just so they have the whole sense of it all. But the biggest issue here is privacy, right? So in the classic peerScholar activity, everything's anonymous. Nobody knows anybody. And so you're dealing everything in an anonymous situation. When you start using video, some of that anonymity can be compromised. Now, is it compromised or not? Well, if you think of the guitar one, not really. All you're really seeing is the person's hands and their guitar, unless their guitar is distinctive or their hands are distinctive or their mid-range is distinctive to some extent. You haven't really revealed who that person is very well. In the oral presentation one, clearly you have, right? Because things like eye contact and facial things are part of oral presentations. That's why I've got my face stuck here. It's gratuitous, but I know it matters. So the way somebody communicates with their face and stuff aids the communication. So you need that there. Now, so let's think about those oral presentations. So yes, everybody knows who they're reviewing. They can see the person they're reviewing, but the person that is being reviewed does not know who's reviewing them. All right, so when they get to the reflect phase and they get the feedback, that feedback is still anonymous. And so it's not that we've totally thrown out anonymity, but clearly the person being assessed has lost their sense of anonymity. Now, so what do you do about that? Well, one of the things is, in many places they are worried about posting on YouTube. You can post videos on YouTube and post them as unlisted, which means that you need the URL, and that's what students can, well, they don't really share the URLs. The videos actually end up embedded right in peerScholar, as you saw. But when they do that, the URL is connected to that, and so students within the class can find each other's videos no problem. Somebody from the outside world technically should not be able to find them without the URL. However, it is still the case that the student's work is out there somewhere on the internet, and in many cases that makes people uncomfortable. And so what makes the most sense to really ensure privacy is if you have an institutional video server. And depending on your institution, I'm at University of Toronto, and we do have an institutional server. It works much like YouTube does. So we have to give our students a few extra instructions about how to post their video to the server and get the URL, which they then bring into peerScholar. But it's not onerous. It's easy enough to do. Just make sure if you have a large class that you talk to whoever administers your institutional server and let them know that, if it's 1,000 students, for example, that 1,000 students are going to be uploading videos in a short period of time. Make sure that no issues are going to happen on their end. The other thing I would highly recommend, this is something students worry about. They worry that let's say I'm going to do an oral presentation, I make a fool of myself for whatever reason. And imagine people for whom, say, English is a second language, or for whatever other reason, really find it uncomfortable to be in front of other people, having other people watch them present. Part of what makes them uncomfortable is the worry that those people might share that video or, bully them in some way via the video. So, in modern day and age, that's a somewhat reasonable concern. We've seen it happen. So I think because of things like that, it's really important if you're doing these to remind students about your university's code of conduct, letting them know that it applies to activities just as it applies to anything else, where we have to treat each other with respect. And if we find evidence of a student not doing that for their fellow students, then we have ways of dealing with this. Yeah, you could get in trouble of a sort. Now, just by expressing that to the class, you can often allay the concerns of those people who are worried about it. If they know that you're serious about this and you've sent the message to their classmates that there will be none of this tolerated, then that makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. It's also a great opportunity to discuss the notion of intellectual privacy and empower the students a bit again, to be able to say to them, that video you create, that's yours. You've created it. You own that baby. Yes, we'll all assess it with each other, but that is your property. And should somebody else use it for nefarious reasons, or reasons you don't attend, you have legal recourse because you own that. And so it's kind of great to begin this notion begin talking to them about this notion of intellectual property, and how it relates to things like ethics in the classroom and other things. Okay, cool. So big punchline of all this: written assignments have a place. They're very useful, but they're not very engaging for students, and faculty don't tend to love them either. Video can kind of lift everything up, allow students to be more creative, allow them to express themselves in ways other than the written word, and it can really allow you to do skill learning on steroids. So if there's a trades program or some program at your university where it's really about students learning actual skills, I don't think you could find a better way to do that than through peerScholar. So just things to keep in mind as you're interacting with faculty and talking to them. And again, should they become interested, push them to this video. If they have any questions, of course, they can come to you, but they can also send an email to me, Steve@peerScholar, no problem. All right, cool. Over and out. I will see you in chapter 3, or I'll probably actually see you in the virtual session that ends chapter 2. So I hope to see you there. Bye-bye.